Very good. Okay. Well, we welcome you to orientation, and I believe that we have experienced judges with us. So this will be a refresher for you, as well as introducing you to the theme for this year. And for those of you who are new, it'll give you an overview of what this National History Day is about. We'll flip the slide. Let's see. I'm wondering, Margaret, if I can, is there a way that I could do the screen myself?
Well, I'm sharing it, so I just,
Okay,
I thought I could
good.
do it with my arrows, but I can't. I have got to do it with my mouse.
Okay. So we thank you for supporting History Day, and truly, you are the linchpin of what makes this whole thing work. It is, as an educator, I can say that I found the value of History Day was through the authenticity of the project, that students in my class and in many classes in New Jersey, History Day is something that students elect to do beyond the classroom. So it's not for a grade, and it's not to please the teacher, but it's to really allow them to take a decision and to take control and agency over their own research and the product that they produce. And that is what is called authentic learning. And then your judging is really what we call authentic assessment, where these kids are not getting a grade from you, they are getting true feedback in the truest sense of the word. And it's like a collaboration between the researcher and the audience, and you being the prime audience. So we'll go to the next slide. There are 5 categories. Paper, which is a typical research paper, website, performance, documentary, and exhibit. And except for the paper, all the projects can be done in groups of up to 5. There's a junior division, grades 6 through 8, and a senior division, grades 9 through 12. So each individual category is judged by optimally 3 judges. So for example, documentary, junior documentary, individual is judged by 3 people. Junior group documentary room is judged by 3 people. So you can see that we need a lot of judging rooms and therefore a lot of judges. So your work with us is much appreciated and very, very necessary. Go to the next slide. Optimally, we have 3 individuals on a judging team. Generally, one of them is someone who's familiar with National History Day and kind of the protocols and the rules and regs of what History Day is about. We also try to have people that are in the field. So people in the fields of visual arts would be involved with documentaries, perhaps websites. Graphic artists, public historians work with our exhibit. And this is how we met Margaret many years ago. She was a public historian. But your goal as a group is to reach consensus. And there is literally one, though you all will keep a score sheet and your notes, these notes will be compiled when you're back in the room working collaboratively onto one score sheet that then is what the student receives. So the captain's role is to be timekeeper, make sure that you're staying on track, but also to work towards that consensus and then record everyone's comments and the scores that we want the students to see. Very important that the students get more than, and you're going to see this a little bit later, more than just a check mark. The elaboration on what their score, why they got the score, is critically important. And because we are at regionals, starting at the end of this month. We have 3 regionals. We'll be at Camden and then Seton Hall, and tell you exactly. We're at Rutgers Camden on the 25th of February. We're at Monmouth University on the 4th of March, and we're at Seton Hall on the 18th of March. These are regional contests, and because the students are moving from regional to the state level, they have an opportunity to edit and revise their projects before they go on to state competition, if they are a qualifier. So it's those comments that you make are critically important. Next slide. The schools have, some schools have a school-wide history fair. We are then at the regionals with the 3 dates that I just gave you. We then go to the affiliate, which is New Jersey's state contest, which is the first Saturday of May. And then the students that qualify to represent New Jersey go on to nationals, which is at the University of Maryland, the second week of June. Next slide. This is really a year-long project. When I was in the classroom and working with History Day kids, we would have a big seminar at the end of May that would introduce the theme for the next year and get the kids kind of excited about what they wanted to think about over the summer, because thinking takes time, research takes time. Summertime is a great time to do that. Students need to get their topic, they start their research, they work on their argument and analysis, they're developing their hypothesis statement, and then ultimately create their entry, which is either a website or documentary or an exhibit board or performance or writing a paper. And then they meet you. They come to the contest and they get to perform or present before their judges. The judges give them feedback, and that becomes a critical part of this process. Next slide. So your mission is to foster a love of history as you have these positive interactions with students. You respect them and offer constructive feedback, giving each project equal consideration. You're kind and creating happy memories. Now, all that being said, sounds very positive and kumbaya-ish, but honestly, these students want more than anything, in a gentle way, but they want authentic feedback from the judges. So in the room, when you're viewing this, obviously paying close attention, making sure that you stay within the time. Every group gets the same amount of time, similar questions or the same number of questions, because honestly, sometimes other groups are sitting in the room watching every other group. And they only asked us 3 questions, and they asked them, another group got, 10 questions. So it's important to consider equal consideration for every project. And then giving them positive as well as constructive feedback on their evaluation sheets. All of this generates an incredible response in students where they really do walk away, whether they advance to state or not. They feel very empowered by this whole experience. Next slide. So let's look at some of the basics that we share with students that will give you some insights on how the students think through this process. Next slide. There is an annual theme. So the theme this year is Frontiers in History, People, Places, and Ideas. Next slide. We tell the students about selecting a topic that they have to remember that this is National History Day. They literally can do any topic they want. They can do figure skating. They can do Broadway musicals. They can do something on sign language. They can do something on seeing eye dogs in New Jersey. Literally anything. The topic doesn't have to be history in the sense that we think of Civil War, Revolutionary War like that, but it has to have history. This means that students have to be able to analyze their subject over at least 30 years. Why? Because History Day asks them to consider the consequences, the so what, the significance of that event, the impact on the people of the time and the people over time, including the impact in their time today. What makes this research significant to share? Literally, the so what. Okay, next slide. So here's an example of why History Day requires students to consider a topic over at least a generation, 30 years. SpaceX is an amazing frontier. Oh my gosh, it's like rattling our brains. It's a great topic, but it is not a National History Day topic because it's too recent. We don't really have any idea what impact this is going to have over time, or even if it's going to last. So it's important for us to, as judges and as myself as an facilitator with NHD, to encourage students to look at a topic over a period of time. Could they look at SpaceX and the origins of space exploration? Yes. Could they look at early stages of the privatization of space travel? Possibly, going back, and if it goes back far enough. And that could lead them to SpaceX, and they could talk about that as part of their so what. But the topic itself really needs to be grounded in at least a generation back. Next slide. Do they have to address everything in the theme? Well, this year it's frontiers, and they're considering people or places or ideas or any combination of those. But what must be considered is the concept of frontiers, something that is a beginning, something that was innovative. In all cases, they have to consider the consequences. That's so what. I keep emphasizing that because our students are very good at doing reports. And a report is who did something, what did they do, when did they do it, where did they do it, perhaps the how or why. That's a good report. But what sets History Day projects apart is the analysis, is the ability to look at their topic and really consider that impact, the so what, the consequences over time. Something that they're not going to necessarily find in a book or on a website. It's something that they have to figure out within the hypothesis that they develop. Next slide. It is essential to pay attention to this theme, frontiers in history, people, places, and ideas. Next slide. History Day has always had an annual theme. They're generally pretty broad-based, but it asks students to think like historians. And honestly, having hung out with a lot of historians and those that are in this field, developing a thesis statement is really one of the hardest things to do. And it really takes time to refine that thesis statement. Unlike a hypothesis in science, which is really a grand question, like what's going to happen? And you can analyze, well, we support that, my evidence supports the hypothesis, refutes my hypothesis, or is undefined. A thesis statement is really like a line drawn in the sand. This is what I'm going to prove. So the NHD theme helps students to focus their topic. It helps them to develop that thesis statement. It helps them to go beyond just doing the report. It helps them to think and analyze and interpret. Very important to focus on the theme. Okay, next slide. Remember, the topic needs to have history. Therefore, anything goes. They can do local history, national history, world history, ancient history, anything that they want, and any form of that. Sports, art, music, literature, anything, psychology. It's the world is literally their oyster, but they need to analyze it through the lens of the theme this year, frontiers, people, places, and things, ideas. But they also need to look at it in its significance over time. Okay, next topic, or next slide. All right, this is a History Day project. So it has to include a process paper, an annotated bibliography, and it has to adhere to NHD rules. Very quickly, a process paper is literally that. It's 500 words. It's a page and a half max, like when you read these things. 500 words that is the introduction of the student to you of the work that they've done. It's a way for them to convey how they found their topic, how they developed their thesis, the connection to the theme. They might use the process paper, and if they're smart, they will, highlighting some key research they found or an interview that they did, something that will capture you, the judge's interest, and get you prepared for what you're going to see. Literally, the process paper is what you read first, or you see first, before you view their documentary or you view their website, etc. An annotated bibliography is something that is unique to History Day, but the purpose behind it is to get students to think through how they use their sources. They're required to have primary and secondary sources. The annotated bibliography, the annotation itself, they're now encouraged by the rules to not be more than three sentences. Sometimes, if those of you that have been around with me for a long time know that some of these annotations went on for an entire page. I mean, they wrote a dissertation on just the source that they used. That's now controlled by adherence to the NHD rules, which says literally, how did you use this source? In what way was this source significant for you, or what did you get from it? Okay, next slide. There are rules for all the entries that are specific for each category. And it's important because since we are a contest, we should be applying things in similar ways from one to another. The topics vary widely. A performance is a performance and has protocols and rules that all students doing a performance are following. Same with a documentary, same with a paper, number of words, size of the exhibit board, websites, how many are student generated words, so that all of the category, all the projects can be viewed in a similar way. And the students should know the rules before they begin. Next slide, please. We evaluate the entries with first and foremost historical quality. Look at this, 60% of their entire project is based on historical quality, accuracy, how thorough their research is. Do they have a range of primary sources? Do they have a balanced presentation? Balanced in the sense that they see multiple sides and perspectives. That's tough in today's world when everything is so slanted and biased. For these kids to be able to read through and look for people that have an opinion or a perspective that's different from their own, and then they deal with that. That's part of the analysis and interpretation and understanding of their topic. 60% is good historical quality and thinking, critical thinking. Then next is 20% is the relationship to the theme. So does it seem to have a connection to frontiers. Do they provide historical context? Do they understand the context in which something happened? And again, one of the biases that kids are plagued with in our world today is what is called presentism, where they see the world, even the world years before them, generations and centuries before them, through their lens, their 21st century lens. And we get ourselves kind of in a box this way because we have to understand what motivated people and how societies functioned different from ours, and certainly many times not what we agree with, or it makes us cringe, but we have to understand the context of the time. Historical context is key. And then the historical significance. Why was this important at that time? How did this impact people at that time? And then over time. And then finally, 20% is the clarity of the presentation itself. How effective is it? Appealing, intriguing, how creative? Is it free of errors and distractions like misspellings or whatever? And how well they use their equipment. If it's a documentary, it should be free of jumpy edits and poor sound quality like that. Often we get, and I've judged at nationals, and sometimes we get so carried away with the beauty or the aesthetics of the presentation itself. We really have to remind ourselves it's only 20%, and really looking at, hey, what's the historical quality here and the significance of their research. So 60% historical quality, relationship to the theme, 20%, and then presentation, the quality of the presentation itself is 20%. Okay, next screen. 80% of the total score connects to research and analysis. What was found and read, what the students did with it, their analysis. The very first score point is historical argument, which is supported through analysis. So this is the annual theme that's woven throughout the project. The historical argument is found in that theme. Next slide. This is a score sheet. It's our updated score sheet. If you see historical argument, let's just look at the exemplaries, because you're doing regionals, and you're not going to find a lot of exemplary at regionals. But by the time you give them some feedback, and if they move on to states and they do their due diligence, and looking at what needs to be improved, we do see exemplary projects at state. Historical argument is consistently supported by analysis and evidence. They're just not saying something without having it backed up. The annual theme is consistently clear and connected to the topic. So the theme is embedded right from the very beginning. Wide research. The bibliography includes an extensive variety of types of available sources. So they can do, in today's world, you can find everything on a website. But is it a book? Is it an article? Is it an interview? Is it a dissertation? And part of their citation in the bibliography will tell you that. It's not just a website, it's a book online, or it's an article that they found online. Ideally, we would love them to go into libraries, and we would love them to go to museums and talk to experts and go to historical sites. They lost this capacity in the past several years, and we need to help rebuild that. Students often are asked, as a facilitator, I was often asked, what's better, primary source or secondary source? And I had to laugh, it's like, it depends on what you need. Certainly you have to start with secondary sources to get that basic report, that grounding, that foundation of who and what and when and where. But the primary sources take us into the context of the time, take us into the mindset, and help us to understand a richer and deeper understanding or awareness of your topic. Primary sources are consistently support the historical argument. They're just not pulled out of thin air. There's relevant connections to the topic's time and place. Very varied perspectives, that you have multiple perspectives throughout the project. I watch this one very carefully when I'm advising students. And did you look for people that disagree with you? And often students, I had one student look at me incredulously and say, why would I do that? Why would I want anybody to say that I'm wrong? Well, what you want is multiple points of view so that you can enhance your own argument. And of course, historical accuracy and the significance of history, that importance of the so what, that it's analyzed in the conclusion. Now, if you look through this, that's the exemplary. But proficient is, it's getting there. The impact of the topic is mostly analyzed in the conclusion. Developing, the impact of the topic is somewhat analyzed, and then a novice's impact of the topic is mentioned, or not evident. This rubric, it took a long time. National History Day folks really worked on this and piloted it among teachers and students throughout the country, History Day folks, to really refine how we are scoring these kids to best give them some feedback. So where do your notes come in? So you fill this out and you do this collaboratively with your scoring team after you've gotten your delicious boxed lunch and you're sitting back in the room together. But what's important is if you are scoring them as developing or even proficient, to tell them what they're missing. Like, why did it not rise to exemplary? Why is it does it seem to be just a developing piece of their evidence? And that's where the corresponding or the elaborations in your comments become so critically important. Okay, next slide. The goal is to encourage students to keep learning by providing them this constructive feedback and in a very positive environment. National History Day sees itself as an education program where it's teaching kids critical thinking and writing and research skills. And it boosts their performance across all subjects, prepares kids for the work world and college and citizenship, and inspires students to do more than they ever could. I just want to extend this a bit. Several years ago, National History Day got a large donation that they opted to use for a study that would analyze the value of History Day on students' lives. And actually, Patterson High School and Patterson School District had been involved with the History Day projects since almost the beginning. And it was one of the 4 schools that were looked at in depth. They had a rural school from Texas. They had an urban school from the Northeast, Patterson. One was from Colorado, I believe, and I can't remember, maybe California. But all these schools had been involved with History Day over a good period of time, several decades. They looked at graduation records. They looked at kids that went to college. They looked at kids who finished college, which is a pretty important data point. Kids at visits to guidance counselors, tardiness to school, grades across the board. What was determined is that students who did History Day to any degree, so these would be kids that might have started and didn't go all the way to regional, but started the process. These students outperformed everyone in their classes. And it didn't matter their socioeconomic, their grades, we have kids that do National History Day that are classified as basic skills kids. that are at-risk learners. And somehow History Day can really turn them on and they do extraordinary work. But they outperformed all of their grade level peers. And the results were quite remarkable and quite consistent. So you are part of a very important and long-standing education program that really does help kids to develop. One last anecdote on that. Years ago, when I was in the classroom, I had a group of 6th graders in the room with me, and some of my 8th graders were over working on the computers. And the 6th grader said something about, how does this help me? Does this matter? And I very flippantly said, no, doesn't matter at all. Meaning there's no grade attached to it. And my 8th graders looked around and they said, oh, don't let her fool you. This counts for everything. This matters more than anything that you'll do. And my students used to do History Day and then go on to their high school that was very heavy STEM oriented. And they got into medical research and they got into Waxman Institute, and they were doing, some were writing science papers in their senior year with college professors, amazing kind of stuff. And I had many of these students say to me, everything I know about research I learned through History Day. So it really does matter, and you're an essential part of it. Okay, next is questions. So, Margaret, let's see if we can see if people are there and if anyone has questions for me. You can post them in the chat, or you can just speak out.
I have a question.
Hi,
Hi, Jen.
how are you?
I'm good.
Hello, friend.
I'm excited to be part of this. I just had a question about if you have scores that are tied. Is there a tiebreaker procedure?
That's a really interesting question, Kim. They don't really, the rubric isn't that set. And because the topics are just, what you're going to see is so different. This is a great time to bring this up though. As a judging group, you are told how many qualifiers you can move forward. So let's say that you're looking at 7 different documentaries and you're told you can move 4 forward. So you're ranking them. You're really looking at, it's more of a ranking system. And at this case, you see 2 that are just so close, but that's okay because both of them are going to move forward, right? We also give you some leeway that if you have 5 extraordinary projects in your room and you're told you can move 4 forward, all you have to do is talk to us about it, and when we're there and we can analyze it with you. Also, you are looking at sometimes projects that have incredible potential, but the annotated bibliography isn't very strong. And you're like, oh, if they had only done, well, they can, because you're at regionals and they're moving into state level, right? So they have time to revise this. And you can say that to them. This is a really excellent topic, connected well to the theme, looks great. However, your annotated bibliography is sorely lacking, and maybe their citations are all screwy or something. That's something that's fixable. If they give you a SpaceX topic, that's not fixable, and you can say that to them. This is really, really an interesting topic, and I bet you had so much fun learning about this, but it really doesn't fit the National History Day criteria. So, does that help?
Using your example with regards to the annotation, how would that apply at the state level?
Oh, very different, because at the state level, those that move forward are representing New Jersey at national. And we want projects that are in really, really good shape. So yes. And I have to say, this is a great time to tell you all this, because when I came aboard in the early 90s, New Jersey was we always had students at nationals, but Minnesota was the state to beat, and Iowa and Denver had a tremendous performance group. New Jersey kind of, wasn't in the mix. Let me tell you, in the last 10 years, New Jersey has really become known at National History Day. We have national winners every year now. And we have kids that are in the top 1 or 2 in their rooms every year, in every category. That I credit to judges who are helping us to find the very best National History Day quality. Again, if you have something that you see with a tremendous project, but boy, if they just did this little thing more, they have time between state and national to tweak things up. But it's got to be really good. Those that qualify at state are going to national to represent us all, so they have to be really strong. Regional is then a very different thing because they do have time to grow and develop. Other questions?
I wanted to know about the, giving a consensus from the group and the feedback to the students. I can't remember if we summed everything up with quotes and then submitted it to, whoever was the head of their documentary or performance. How do we do that? Is that like a consensus with quotes, or is it, do we write specific things to specific people?
So let's say you're watching individual documentary, and there's 3 of you. So you have the process paper you've read, you watch the documentary,
Right.
You're given the annotated bibliography. I always like to thumb through that before I see the documentary.
Right.
Then you have your period, your question and answer period. And all through that, you're kind of taking notes on your own paper, your own score
Right.
sheet. When you get back to the room, and this is a great time to say this, do not ever say anything to each other about any project until you're in that judge's room behind closed doors. There are ears everywhere, and boy, do we do that. So anyway, when you're all safely ensconced in your judge's room and you've got your wonderful box lunch, then you begin, the first thing you'll do is you'll rank them. And so you've seen 5. Do we have consensus on our top 3? And you're like, oh man, we have really 4, terrific. Or, well, we only really see 2 that we like. Do we have to send the 3rd one forward? No, let's move forward what you think is really worthy, or has great potential that can be adjusted before state. And then you have your rubrics that you're filling out, and some groups do that together. So the head judge has the main score sheet, and they're doing the check marks as everybody collaborates and agrees. Sometimes everyone has their own, and they look at it and say, okay, I gave this a proficient, I gave this a developing, I could go with developing on this. And you have that collaborative understanding. And then you have your notes that you've made. I know that as a head judge, what I would do is I would collect everyone's score sheets with their comments, and we've all talked it through. And then I would go ahead and just stay and write it all up so that everybody else could go.
Yeah.
So, don't know if you have somebody that's that accommodating for you as a head judge, but those are some ways that you do it. But what the student then ultimately gets is that one sheet that is the rubric filled out with the check marks and the elaborating comments that are supportive. And
Yes, as a consensus, though, that would be
As a
the
consensus,
consensus
yeah.
that's written out.
and they go back to the teacher, who then distributes them to the students. I'll tell you, as a facilitator and as a teacher, I always, in the back of my mind, hoped that the teacher was reading all of this too. Because sometimes things that kids did were things that they should have been taught. It's something that the teacher should have helped guide them through. This is the role of the facilitator. So I always was hoping that the teachers were reading these as well, but I think in many cases they are, because we see the same teachers come back with new kids every year, and they would get better and better every year. So the more they experience it, the better they get. Does that help?
Yes.
Other questions?
Yeah, there's, Joan, there's 2 questions in the chat. One is a study of the 4 school, the impact of National History Day available to review. So,
Oh, yes, it's online. You can find it. It's a great question. And if I could remember the name of the study, but it's on the National History Day. You can go to the National History Day website and find the study. There's a synopsis, and then there is the actual full study that was done. So, but it's on the national website.
and then there was another question about registering, or when do you know where you're judging or your categories? And that was a question that was directed to me. And what I'm going to do is I will share that we will be emailing judges just to confirm, that you are judging at Rutgers Camden or Seton Hall or at Monmouth or at the States. And then we don't necessarily give you your assignment in the email, but we do send you all the necessary information to attend. If you are judging papers or websites, you will receive that via email. If you have not yet registered to judge, it is very important to register so that we have you in our system. And there are links that I just put in the chat that you can use to register for each and every single contest, or it's just one contest that you can attend, but they are right there. But we will be communicating with you. And I see that there is a hand up, so I don't know if I answered your question or if you have another one.
I'll jump in here with a favor for all of our judges. It really is critical that you are in the judges' room at 8 o'clock on the day that we're judging. And the reason for this is that we need to know who we have and if our groups are formed and that everyone is ready to go. We have had people that have showed up at 10 o'clock and are very annoyed with us when we have to say judging has started and there's not a place for you, but I drove all this way. And I want to say, yes, and you were 2 hours late. It's just, it has to move forward. The students are expecting to start. We have a very tight schedule with kids start at 10 a.m. It's every 20 minutes or every 15 minutes. It's important that we have our judges in place. The second thing that I would really like to ask, life happens and we understand this. If for any reason you cannot be there that day, let us know as soon as you possibly can. Even if it's that day, even if it's 7 o'clock that morning, you wake up with a violent flu or whatever, just let us know so that we can readjust our judging teams. Those two things. Thank you.
Joan, I have a question. So I've never judged an in-person conference before. I've only ever judged a virtual one. So I would love sort of like a rundown of what that day looks like, just because I've never experienced it before.
Oh, this is so great. And we haven't done this for 3 years, so we're so excited. So the judges show up at 8. We have lovely food for you. We make sure that you're sitting at the table with the people that you're going to be judging with, so you get to know each other. You get your packets with the number, no names and no schools, but the number and the topic, so that you have your the lead judge will get that final paper, that the ultimate, but you'll have your own papers, and you can kind of get a sense of what you're going to see. We do a little bit of a welcome about 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock, and then we disperse you to your rooms. We try to get the exhibit judges out early so they can go to the exhibit room and actually see all the exhibits and look at the process paper and the bibliography before the kids come in for that interview. So the exhibit folks will be out of the room pretty early. Everyone else will be out to their rooms by 10. The students will come in, they hand you their process paper, they hand you their annotated bibliography. While they're setting up their equipment or their performance or whatever, you will have a chance to look through, read the process paper, look through the bibliography, get a sense of what you're about to see. And then the student does their performance or shows the documentary, 10 minutes. And then you have time to have this conversation with them. Now, going back, one of the things that we do in the room before you disperse is we talk about sample questions. And I believe that, Margaret, we should have that, but we have a list of general sample questions. I know that in groups that I've worked with, we all kind of talk about, how about you take that question, I'll take this question, you'll take that question, so that we have that consistency, and that there's no, like, I don't know what to ask this kid. There's like these just good general generic questions to ask. And then that conversation will emerge naturally from things that you've seen, genuine questions that you have. How did you go about doing this? You know, and interesting questions will emerge. That discussion is so important to the kids. It's actually the least important in your judging. So when the kids go to nationals and they're in finals, there is no conversation at all with the judges. The project has to stand on its own. Process paper, annotated bibliography, the project itself. But it's the value of coming to a college campus, having professional people sitting in front of you, having this interaction with people that are genuinely interested in what honestly kids have invested months doing, and they're so invested in it. That's incredibly valuable. We have had kids that are wonderfully articulate and great salespeople. And boy, I'll tell you, they really, what comes across in that interview is just wow. But if you really get back and look at the process paper, the annotated bibliography, and the project itself, you're like, you know, everything I know about this, I learned from what they told me. I didn't learn it from the project itself. So it's interesting that how important that interview is in the process, but it's the least important in how we actually score it. Okay, so now you have seen everybody, you've gathered up all your stuff, you're talking about how about those nets and great weather today, and you know, I wonder what we're having for the box lunch. Then you get in behind the closed doors and you can begin with, first and foremost, how are we going to rank? So what we're going to need, and my colleague Barbara and I will be the ones that will be facilitating this in the room. We're going to need to know your rankings. So we need to know the qualifiers that are moving on, because we're getting ready for that award ceremony, for the actual ceremony. Once you get that to us, then you can start with finishing out the final score sheet and sharing your comments and collaboratively working on what is it as our team do we want to convey to this student or these students about their project. And certainly taking some time and energy for the ones that are the qualifiers and moving on. If you say to a kid, and this has sometimes happened, this is just incredibly wonderful. They have nowhere to go with that. And is there anything they could do to improve it? That's what we're trying to get to do. And then you've had your lunch, you've talked to your friends and your newfound buddies in National History Day. And about 2:30, you're done. 2:30, 3 o'clock, you're done, and off you go. Does that
And in
help?
terms of the it does help. Yes, it's great. Thank you. And in terms of the qualifiers, do you have to choose qualifiers in every round, or if there are projects that, so every round has to have, or every category?
Every judging group has qualifiers. Yes, every judging group. And they have anywhere from 2 to 5, depending on how many total. But as mentioned, you may have, you have 3 that you can advance, but you have 4 that are just extraordinary. Barbara and I, call us over, make your pitch, we'll look at materials and make sure we can do that. By the same token, you're looking at 5 projects, and they're all Elon Musk SpaceX, and you're thinking they just don't need it. That never happens, but you'll find a couple that will not qualify. So you might have to be able to advance 3, and you only see really 2 out of your 5 or 6, and that's fine. So we're not. It's a general understanding, but we can be flexible. Okay.
Joan, do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
try to pair new judges with experienced judges as
Oh,
someone
yes.
who's brand new?
Yes, we do. We always try to have a person who is experienced with National History Day. Either they've taught, they've been a facilitator, they have judged in the past. So
Okay.
yes, we try very hard to have people that have never done this before working with people that have some experience.
Great.
I have a question about check-in. We get there, we go to a check-in table, and what is the process whereby we find all our other parts with whom we're going to be relating?
Well,
In other words, fellow judges.
Margaret has little tents set up that we put on each table, and it will say junior documentary or group junior documentary, group 1. And you have your packet and you realize that you're junior documentary group 1. And so you're walking around to find that table, and then you sit down and others will find you. And if they get lost, we'll bring them to you. These are the people that you're working with. And again, if people are showing up about 8 o'clock, we have plenty of time to get that all sorted. But if people are drifting in at 9 o'clock, that kind of puts us under a little bit of a gun. So thank you for that.
Joan, is there parking?
Yes, Margaret will be sending out information about directions to the campus, where you are to park. Rutgers generally has a very easy online thing that you fill out with your license plate and the make of your car, and then you're in the system and you're not going to. So all of that information will be sent out to you prior to the day, so that you will be very comfortable finding where you're supposed to be. All the campuses, we're at Monmouth this year, Rutgers Camden, and Seton Hall. And all of them are very user-friendly. The parking is convenient. The signage is always excellent. The signs are out so that you know exactly where you're supposed to go. And they're not overwhelmingly huge. And all of them are relatively easy to get to. and this is speaking from someone who doesn't like to drive and is spatially impaired, so I don't do directions well, but my GPS and I seem to get there just fine. And then once I'm on campus, the directions and the signage is so good that it's relatively easy.
And Margaret, you'll get back to Paula and me if you need additional info.
Absolutely. It's on the list of things to do tomorrow.
There you go.
And you'll be hearing from us, so you'll receive information. You won't receive necessarily the category that you'll be judging, but you'll receive information about where to park, what building to go to, times, and different helpful hints.
Yeah, agenda for the day.
Yeah.
If I could put in a pitch, if you have any room in your life to do a regional contest as well as the state contest, it's fascinating, because what you see at regionals and then what you see at state, you see the growth of the students, and at state you're seeing a much richer quality because they've qualified for the state contest. And given our track record in the last several years at state, you could be looking at a national winner because the kids have done so well. So again, thanks to your good work and dedication and finding these kids when you're judging so effectively.
And Joan, just to follow up on that, the students are so eager to receive your feedback. They really, they are clamoring to get that feedback. I've never seen students so eager to receive feedback before, but they want to use that to improve, right? And so having very constructive, meaningful feedback is valued by the students. They've put in a lot of time and energy, and they want to improve, especially between regionals and states, and then from states to nationals. So the feedback is really a very critical component of this entire learning process.
As a teacher, and I was an English teacher for a long time, and I used to write copious comments on students' papers and essays, and all they really wanted was the grade. And it was so discouraging. But as a history day facilitator, I like, as Margaret said, these kids poured over these comments, and just if they just wanted to know every nuance of what the judges thought. So, and then they took it very much to heart, when you're in the judging room, there might be something that you see that the student missed, a really key source or something. Make sure that you put that on the score sheet in your comments. It's not the time in that conversation to tell them about it. First of all, they're not going to remember, but let them have that moment and shine in that moment. But certainly, if you know of a source or a resource, historic site, whatever, encourage them to find it and make sure that that's in your comments, because they will follow up on that. And I can speak to that personally, having done History Day with kids for about 15 years. Do we have any other questions? I believe that this will be online on the website. So if you want to go back and refer to it, I believe that the rubric is also on the website. Margaret can speak better to that than I can. And then any questions that you have, you can send them to the New Jersey History Day office. And if it's anything that you need me for, they can forward it to me and I'd be glad to reply.
Margaret, I know that I signed up to judge the websites, but if you need myself or even Vicky on the day of Seton Hall's regional, will be there with students, we can certainly be pulled to help out if you need us that day.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you.
Great,
Jane.
thank you so much. Appreciate
course.
that, Jane.
Can't promise we'll be there exactly at 8 o'clock in the judge, because we're gonna have to get our
Understood.
kids in there, but we will be
Understood.
close to that that point.
Understood.
But of
I have
course,
to-
if you need us, we'll be
I
there.
have to say that I started judging I started first judging at the regional or state contest because I had a number of students and sometimes their times conflicted and it became so problematic with who I was going to visit. And if I could say to parents, now I'm judging, so you and the kids are fine, and I'll see you at the award ceremony afterwards.
Right.
And it worked out really well. And
Yeah,
then that's where I learned so much too. As a teacher, I learned so much with being a judge.
Well, Vicki and I have done it so many times, so you can certainly use us that day if necessary. But
That
we're
would be
we're the only chaperones for our students there, so we don't tend to, do it. We try to do the virtual judging if necessary.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's-
we appreciate that. And we appreciate everyone here volunteering their time.
Thank you so much.
It's so
In the event
valuable.
of emergency, like a, God forbid, a flat tire or something, what is the means to contact you?
The New
Let's say
Jersey
it's that
History,
day.
the New Jersey History Day email, we'll have someone monitoring that email.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
All right, everyone, I'm gonna log off. Thank you so much for everything.
Well,
Thank you.
you.
We
Have a great
appreciate
night.
it. Margaret, did we get everything that was in the chats and
Yep,
we covered everything?
we sure did. So thank you to all, and thank you, Joan. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank
I'll see you all at the contest.
Yeah,
All right,
very
thank you.
exciting.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Margaret.
You're welcome.